Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you to Senator Duvall and Representative Mortensen and Representative Weisgrim for joining us in our first remote legislative coffee. This is a new experience, at least for our coffees. I don't even know necessarily if we call it that. I personally am not drinking coffee this morning. I don't know.
I am.
Hey, okay, so at least there's one person drinking coffee. So this is our first time for the 2021 session. I know we've probably all been a part of Zoom all throughout this year, so at least we have that on our side. I would like to thank the Pierre Area Chamber of Commerce and their Government Affairs Committee for making this event possible and co-hosting it with the League of Women Voters of Pierre. My name is Jennifer McIntyre, and I am honored to be today's moderator. We have a limited time, so I ask that everyone keep their responses brief, and we'll go through introductions and as many questions as possible today. So let's get started. Would each of you give a short introduction and just tell us briefly about a bill that you specifically would like your constituents to know about that maybe isn't getting as much of a spotlight, or is? We can start with Senator Duvall.
All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer. Thanks to the League and also the Chamber for hosting this. And thanks for those who created technology to make this happen. I appreciate that. I am serving in the Senate after 8 years in the House. I serve on 4 committees, retirement laws, health and human services, which is a brand new committee for me, ag and natural resources, and transportation. The Senate is, much quieter than the House. There are fewer of us, so that changes the dynamics of what I've experienced the last 8 years. Some of the bills I'm working on really are pretty arcane cleanup legislation, but one bill that I'm really interested in is something that started last year, and we are looking for one-time money this year for a bioprocessing research and development project. It would be a joint project with SDSU and the School of Mines to use the ingenuity of our students, their research capabilities, engineering capabilities to develop new products that can come from some of the crops and the timber that we produce in South Dakota. So that's one among many millions of dollars being requested for one-time spending this year.
Hi, I'm Mike Weisgram. This is my first session in the House, and I'm very much enjoying it. I'd like to say, people ask me how I'm doing, and I'll have to say I'm not sure anything really prepares you for it. I had a thought of what work would be like, but it's more encompassing than I thought. It's very energizing. It's rewarding to be there. So I appreciate the opportunity to be there. I was an independent businessman for lots of years and a city councilman for 5 years. So I'm trying to bring that perspective to each piece of legislation that I vote on and weigh in on, especially in the committee work. The 2 pieces of legislation that are in front of us soon is the homeschool legislation, as well as how we'll weigh in on the different health plans, that revamping of health plans for state employees. Those are 2 things that are, pretty close to me at the moment. I can reflect on some earlier votes that I've taken, but I try to look forward. I don't really tend to look backwards on votes that I've already weighed in on. So, those 2 items are kind of front and center of what's in my mind. I don't have the Senate bill numbers in front of me. Maybe you can help me out with that, Mary, but those are the 2 issues that, like I say, are top of mind at the moment.
You bet. Well, thanks, Jennifer and the Chamber for putting this together. Like Mike, it's my first year in, and so it's been really interesting to see how expectations match up with reality. And like him, I'm I'm enjoying it, and I would say 90% of the time I'm really enjoying it, and 10% of the time I wonder why I did it in the first place, and that's a pretty good ratio. It really, I mean, I no regrets and really no complaints. And I appreciate putting these together in large part because one of the things that surprised me the most is how little time I have to consider some of the issues that I'm asked to weigh in on. And so to the degree to which events like this inspire people to reach out to me in private perspective, I hope they do, because we don't get that much of it and we don't have that much time. And so do not feel like when you're reaching out to me, oh, this guy has so much to do and I will be adding to his plate. It's quite the opposite. It really is helpful to get as much perspective as we can before we vote on these things. And events like this hopefully will pique interest in the public to help us out in that way. The one piece of legislation I think I would point folks to is a Senate bill that I'm co-sponsoring. It's already passed through Mary's chamber, which is Senate Bill 86. It tries to set up a mechanism to avoid the litigation that we've seen in Amendment A. I mean, I don't know anybody who is, very happy about the way this has gone. I mean, this measure was brought. It's a little unclear when anybody had some ideas that it might be an invalid way to amend the Constitution. That question was answered by a circuit court. It has not been answered by the Supreme Court yet, but everybody agrees that having a process where we're answering this question after millions of dollars have been spent on campaigns and after a lot of votes are cast, people sign petitions, that's the wrong time to do it. We should really be trying to take care of these problems on the front end. And so Senate Bill 86 tries to directly address and take care of that problem for South Dakota in the future. I think that it's a good solution to a clear and current problem. It's not going to, solve the frustrations we've got today, but hopefully it can avoid them in the future.
All right, thank you. All of you brought up issues that relate to questions that we will be asking today. So that's great. So let's move on to questions. The first is in regards to the one-time funds. How would you like to see them used? And is there a project that you want them to be applied to?
I'll take that one because I did bring it up and I did mention my personal priority. I think though, from a broader perspective, we need to remember that one-time funds can be spent only once. So that you should not establish some sort of ongoing program that's going to require future spending. My personal priorities would be to buy down debt where we can, to invest in infrastructure that we need to, and to figure out those projects that will really set South Dakota up for future success down the road.
I would mirror that. My criteria is what will cause us economic benefits in the future. I like the buying down debt as well. There's some brick and mortar things that I think are very worthy. I'll mention one. I'm not a South Dakota Mines grad, but I think that's a very good project. That's replacing a building that's definitely past its service, and I see the benefits of directing some monies that way. But in general, it's pretty much what Mary said. It's investments in the future. We surely don't want to enact some expenditures that would only address a short-term fix. So South Dakota is pretty conservative, and most likely I'm not afraid of one-time monies being spent improperly, but obviously that's what I would have my guard up about.
Well, unsurprisingly, I just defer to these two on most things, but we're in the same line. A few of the specific projects I'd mention, I ran and talked a lot about agriculture and education. There's a proposal to build a ag facility at Mitchell Technical Institute in Mitchell Technical College, I guess now in Mitchell, that will train farmers, ranchers, folks who fix the great big, very complicated machinery now. I mean, jobs that we have present need for across South Dakota in the ag sector. So it kind of marries the two things that I like to think about, talk about, and promote a lot. There's a proposal to spend some money that Senator Duvall maybe is the prime sponsor on, that would rehabilitate some rail line between Fort Pierre and Midland. That carries a lot of ag products. It carries a lot of products out of the Black Hills, gets those to market. Those are just part and parcel of the kind of infrastructure things that when you have one-time money that makes a lot of sense to go to. There's a proposal to build a kind of a state-of-the-art beef barn at the state fairgrounds. This is a state facility. This is a big opportunity for Huron, who I think a lot of folks acknowledge could use a win. I mean, I talk a lot about how we want to be a state of broad shoulders and not just a pointy head, meaning we can't just build everything in Sioux Falls. We need to have things across the state that are fitting of these communities. And so I'm excited that communities really responded and come and showed us that they are as committed to it as they want us to be at the state level. And so I'm hopeful that they call the DEX is kind of a new kind of crown jewel of South Dakota, and can be a thing that'll serve us for a long time. I told somebody when they were in that I hope I get to bring my grandkids to a rodeo there, or a beef showing there. So those are really the kind of legacy, long-term impact projects that are suitable for this one-time dollars.
Thank you. The next questions are in consideration of state employees. Do you think that the state government has an issue recruiting and retaining new state employees? And if yes, what do you think can be done to increase employee retention?
You guys want me to start going first? So, I mean, it's not really fair that I get to listen and think while you talk all the time.
I suggest we play round robin, Will. So you're next,
okay.
And then Mike, you get to go.
Okay.
Well, Jennifer, it's a question that the three of us have been thinking about since we heard, in particular in this with respect to the health insurance benefit change, something that the three of us leapt into action on immediately, as we know just how important it is to not only the 3,000 to 4,000 state employees that are in Pierre, but the 12,000 employees, approximate on both counts, that are statewide. And so the details matter a lot in how that goes. My wife worked for Game Fish and Parks and left there to work in the private sector, and left for a pretty big salary pay increase, right? It wasn't until she got into the new job that we realized the magnitude of the pay increase, and that we kind of didn't appreciate the difference in healthcare costs that were going to accrue for us and our kids. And so I don't fault the administration overall for saying that our basket of compensation doesn't really look like the private sector's. I don't think we pay nearly as well. And the benefits are, in some cases, a little bit more generous. Now, they're proposing to kind of flip those two, but I don't think they're doing it in a way that is going to be to keep compensation totally equitable across, in that what everyone pays in health insurance is a set dollar amount. And if money is then flipped into salaries and put back in, I assume it will be put in on a percentage basis. And so I'm kind of worried about equity among our state employees on that end. We have asked for a lot of information from them, and I mean the administration, for their plan on that. And at this point, I've got more questions than I've got sufficient answers. And so unless we can do something to make sure that compensation across the board is held to the standard that it needs to be, I'm going to have a hard time getting there with them on that particular item. But to answer the narrow question, yeah, we're having a hard time. Let's not make it any tougher.
I'll weigh in next. This has been a real head scratcher in some regards. My frame of thought comes from a person who had, 13 employees versus thousands. I don't know. I've had at least 6 meetings with Commissioner Seeley regarding my thoughts about the health plan and as well as compensation. I've given him my thoughts, and I think the short answer is that I don't think he feels that it's affordable. But to address the question, I think the retention of state employees and trying to fill the open spots. I think the last time I talked to him, to Darren, he told me that there were 40 open positions in Pierre. As a side note, I think when last time we 3 talked to the Pierre School Board, they had 20 opens. So I think there's 60 open positions with two entities. So, what's the challenge? I think it's pay is part of it. I think the cost of housing in our communities plays a part of it as well. So those are 2 challenges that aren't going to be fixed overnight. I do have to give credit to the administration for trying to go to a market-based healthcare system, because quite frankly, the one that we have now, to me, would not be sustainable. They continue to come back to the well, so to speak, and ask for more money to backfill the current health plan. And I realize that's kind of part of the benefit compensation package, but it isn't sustainable. As a businessman, it doesn't work. It's just not something that you can continue to do. We talk about one-time money and ongoing projects. Well, this is kind of no way to run a railroad, in my humble opinion. So I really compliment the administration for trying to go forward with it. The reason I'm struggling with it is it just doesn't, the compensation package doesn't seem to offset it, and nobody wants to go backwards. So at the moment, it's going to take more for me to get on board. Like I said, I've given them my thoughts of how I can get there. I'm one legislator, but I'm kind of being a squeaky wheel at the moment. I don't know if that answers the question very well, but like Will, I'm not comfortable yet.
Well, to tee off what Mike just talked about, I too have spent a lot of time with Commissioner Seeley saying, what's going on here? And Mike mentioned it, and I will reiterate it, that the current plan was not sustainable. Every year for the past several years, the legislature has been asked to spend millions backfilling the healthcare plan. So BHR, Bureau of Human Resources, was said, you need to figure something out that is sustainable and that we can afford. And so the Bureau put together a work group with state employees, with private sector employers, with staff from the governor's office, and within the insurance industry to say, what can we do differently? Now, Commissioner Seeley has said that there are 4 different plans, and state employees will need to work with their HR directors to figure out what's best. But the vast majority of state employees will indeed be better off, not worse off. Now, it might take some more work on the state employees' part to figure out which of the 4 plans works best for them. So I reluctantly supported Senate Bill 57, I think it was, when it came through, with the caveat that, state employees who have questions or concerns need to take those to BHR to sit down and crunch the numbers. And if we find out that state employees are, by and large, not going to be better off, then we need to come back with a different plan. But the bigger question is, what about recruiting and retaining state employees? And one thing I heard is that we need to be willing to let state employees work from places other than Pierre. Now, I'm sure that someone representing Pierre and the Pierre Chamber helping to host this meeting, that's a painful thing to hear. I love Pierre. I'm happy I raised my family here, but apparently it's not for everyone. So, that's one of the things that we need to wrestle with. Mike talked about affordable housing, and I have heard too that is an issue that somehow needs to be addressed. Pay is not as competitive as the private market, but the retirement system is really great. So, it's a cost benefit thing with no easy answers.
May I weigh in again? It's interesting. This morning I was at a meeting with City of Fort Pierre folks trying to talk about the feasibility of buying some land and being offering a TIF district tax increment financing to open up more housing lots, and that is not a small feat, but I think our city leaders, Pierre and Fort Pierre, they know the same story. So I think I know there are efforts underway to address it. That isn't going to happen overnight, but the more we talk about it, the more we kind of put our foot on the gas pedal a little bit, the more things are going to happen. So all we can do is realize what we've got and move forward.
All right, and the other question did relate to the health insurance and all that, and I think you guys covered that quite well. So we're actually going to move on to a different issue. What are the ramifications of the court decision that found Amendment A, dealing with recreational marijuana, unconstitutional? And how do you anticipate the legislature dealing with the issue of medical marijuana this session?
Okay, I think I'm up first. Well, medical marijuana, I think you should know that there are a group of legislators that are definitely working on both issues, the recreational and medical. I think there was a bill ready to be introduced about medical marijuana, but I think and they were working with the administration. I think the administration just felt that, and I think they were very appreciative of the people working on the legislation, but I think they felt that there just needed to be more voices to come to the table. So I think it's House Bill 1100, and what that does is initiates a summer study to get more players to talk about the systems and the program that needs to be set up for medical marijuana. The consultant they hired in the meetings that I've gone to regarding this legislation, and even the consultants that were present at the meeting said, you really need about 10 to 14 months to set up a program that has the systems in place to run a successful medical marijuana program. So I think the administration is erring on the side of being cautious in rolling out a program that works well and is to the benefit of South Dakota residents. Now, in the meantime, what does that do? It makes some people angry. And I'm sure the benefactor of some of those emails that, hey, the voters have spoke, we wanted it July 1 of 2021, and now what's going on? So there's definitely some mistrust, yet I can definitely see their opinion. I apologize that things don't look like they're moving forward, but they are moving forward, and it has to be done in a comprehensive and well thought out way. I have my thoughts about the judge, our circuit court judge, declaring that constitutional A is unconstitutional, and I read the brief, and I think she did a great job, and it was understandable. I'll probably let one of my other cohorts weigh in on that, but things aren't dead there either. So with legislation really being thought of to address recreational marijuana as well. So I'll let Will or Mary talk about that, but this isn't falling on deaf ears. You know, we're voters too, and we've expressed our thoughts, and under the people got under God the people rule is our motto in South Dakota, and that does not fall on deaf ears. So Will or Mary, I'll let you take constitutional A or address whatever you'd like.
Well, I hope that Will's bill to pre-answer some of the constitutional questions about constitutional ballot measures before they're circulated will help. Right now, you know, this Judge Klinger said this is unconstitutional, but I'm sure that will be appealed to the Supreme Court. The legislature can't do much of anything until the Supreme Court rules. And frankly, even if they do rule, the measure says that the Department of Revenue has exclusive authority, which to me implies that the legislature just gets to sit by and watch some of this unfold. Now, there are probably things the legislature can do that are pertinent to recreational marijuana, but the overarching responsibility falls with the Department of Revenue, which in itself raises a constitutional question. As far as medical marijuana, that was approved by almost 70% of the voters. The legislature is aware of this, but I think it's our job as the legislature to make sure things are done responsibly rather than rapidly. And we have been told by others who've gone down this road before us, it takes at least 14 months and sometimes even longer to come up with a responsible program. So erring on the side of caution might make us unpopular, but I think it's the right thing to do.
I'll try not to retread a lot of ground that's already been stated, but on the particular legal posture, when you asked about Amendment A, so it's important to know that Judge Klinger ruled basically on whether the drafters of Amendment A followed our correct process in our Constitution for how you amend it. And what she said, and these are attorneys largely in Washington, D.C. and Sioux Falls who drafted this, and her finding is no, they did not follow the process in our Constitution for how to amend it. So again, the frustration for me on this whole thing is that we didn't find that out till after we voted. And so on that question, as Mary said, I think that's kind of on ice until we get a definitive ruling. I see in the newspaper yesterday, the governor said that she would veto any legislation that attempted to mirror some of the language of Amendment A to put it in statute. And there's some discussions of, some support for that. I mean, I opposed Amendment A in the Chamber's forum all the way back in May and again in the fall, and I supported 26. But now I kind of feel like my views have to take a back seat to those of the people of South Dakota. So again, I think A is kind of on ice. I mean, I'll bring it up again. I'm a little bit, like a lot of voters, frustrated that medical marijuana is going to take longer than we thought, it appears. But I also don't have the technical expertise. And of course, we are the legislative branch and not the executive branch. We are not executing these laws. And the folks that are, largely in the Department of Health, have got kind of a lot on their plate right now. And I'm sympathetic to them. I mean, that's a lot of our neighbors. We know how hard they've been working. We know that they've had probably more work in the Department of Health in the last 12 months than that department's ever had in its history. And so I'm sympathetic when they come to us and say, we're committed to implementing this faithfully, but it's not a feasible timeline. And so I'm probably going to wind up giving them grace on that side, but don't think that, to Mike's point, we're voters too. I supported IM 26 the whole way through. I want to see it implemented, and as quickly as they can, I guess, is kind of my answer.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for our representatives. With the rapid increase in COVID cases on the House side, do you support requiring masks like they do in the Senate?
I don't. I have, Mike and I and Mary, I mean, all three of us are among the most diligent mask wearers in the building. I will tell you that you know, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school, but a large number of my colleagues have already had COVID and pretty recently. And so I am not comfortable requiring some of these folks to wear masks or kind of impart my view on that on them. I will tell you personally that there's been a lot of anxiety in my household in the last 24 hours. My wife made me go quarantine Thursday night pending the results of the test that I took that morning, Wednesday night, which came back negative, which is good. I'm, so far so good for me personally, but yeah, I mean, there's a real psychological impact. I mean, the people who are getting sick are our colleagues and our friends, and I'm worried about them, and I'm worried about myself and the people around me. I mean, I don't want to be the cause of anyone else's sickness, and so I'm going to continue to wash my hands a ton and wear a mask and try to stay healthy so I can keep doing the job people sent me to do.
Well, I would say that requiring masks in the house would be nearly impossible to achieve. Like Will mentioned, many of them have had COVID, so they feel like they're not part of the problem. So really all you can do is wear a mask, keep your distance. Yet you know the nature of the place. If you're going to be informed by a lobbyist, or when you go to committee, it's fairly close contact. So it is what it is. All I can do is wear a mask and wash my hands a lot. And by the way, I need some lotion in my desk because my hands are looking like I've been working outside. So it just is what it is. I get tested every week. I've not felt sick. I test negative. So you just go forward and do the best you can.
Okay. The next question is mainly for Senator Duvall. However, there was a House bill that was sent to the 41st day. So if either of you guys have any opinions, please chime in. South Dakota has received terrible scores nationally due to our lack of transparency in government. And while Governor Noem campaigned on transparency, do you agree with her that it is okay to keep the details of how much taxpayer money is spent on her security secret? And do you support Senate Bill 103, which would shield dark money from donors of nonprofits in South Dakota, along with Senate Bill 165 that would exclude costs of meals, lodging, travel, compensation, etc., from being considered security records? If you do support the governor and these bills, please explain how this advances transparency.
Thanks for that. I have not read Senate Bill 103 yet about the dark money. Rather than just judging a bill by its title, I will have to read it before I can tell you whether it's good or bad. On the surface of it, talking about dark money shielding dark money sounds like a really bad idea for South Dakota when we're basically one big community anyway. So I have not read that bill yet. Senate Bill 165 will be coming up in my committee on Wednesday morning. It was held over from a week ago out of respect for the prime sponsor who's on the Appropriations Committee and had a really big day on Wednesday. The budget for public safety and the Highway Patrol is public knowledge. But as far as individual records, as far as motels, meal costs, it's public money, but I don't know how that is going to help people understand whether or not the governor is doing the governor's job. For over 40 years, the Highway Patrol has had responsibility for providing security for the governor 24/7. I think people here are just wanting to find ways to make our governor look bad. And I think we should focus on maybe doing what's good for all of South Dakota. I will probably be voting against Senate Bill 165 on Wednesday, but I have not heard either proponent or opponent testimony on it.
I kind of wrote down the few different groups in there. You know, Mike and I in the local government committee in the House spend a lot of time talking about open government matters. I mean, I think we've had, Mike, 5, 6 bills, something like that, that dealt with open meetings laws. And I think we've reached some good results in there. I mean, we hear from the Newspaper Association a lot, which have a lot of interest in open records in general. And that's where they generate a lot of content. And then the municipalities and these kind of things. And we talked about whether you can use Facebook Live for a meeting. Some people didn't want that. We shot that bill down. There's a lot of talk about how we can get public notices onto a website in addition to in the newspaper to increase some public access. So it's a topic we spend a lot of time on. On the security costs, I've got a little bit of a unique perspective on it, in that I worked for Governor Dugard for 3 years, and I was like 22, 23, and 24 years old when that was going on. And so I'm the perfect guy to staff him a lot, because I wasn't married, I didn't have any kids, I wasn't being taken away from anything particularly important other than softball occasionally. But I will tell you that when I staffed him, whether we were at an official function, an unofficial function, a partisan, a political function, the Highway Patrol protected him. And to Senator Duvall's point, the protection of the governor is an obligation of the state at all times, and no matter what the governor is doing, and no matter which governor it is. And so when it gets down into which details are provided as part of the budget, I am going to defer to the Highway Patrol and those folks, and that the safety remains paramount, and that the overall budget number is something that we do keep an eye on. And if there are some undue increases there overall, that we make sure that the public's getting every bang for its buck. On Senate Bill 103, I actually just read that this morning. I had relayed some concerns that I had heard from others and helped put together an amendment to it. It appears to me to be kind of it's a response to some things that have happened in other states, and bills like that get an extra bout of scrutiny from me, in that I ran and told you guys I'd be focused on South Dakota problems and South Dakota solutions to them. And so when you come to me and say, well, these other states have done this and this is, and then I start to, my eyebrows go a little bit higher in my head. And so it's something I'm really working through, in that it talks about nonprofits, so not just charities, but we've got all kinds of nonprofits. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce is a nonprofit. And then it talks about government agencies and not just state government. We're talking every local unit of government all the way down. And so there's a lot of impacts on a lot of parties there. And the goal of it, I think, is to ensure that we've got privacy for folks who want to give to your church or give to these things. And I think that could be laudable. But I am very aware of unintended consequences that come from trying to map some law from some other state onto South Dakota. So that's a thing that I'm viewing with a healthy bout of skepticism at this point. Partner, you're muted.
I apologize. So to talk about the security costs of the governor and some other emails I received about the travel costs that our governor incurred on supporting other campaigns. I don't think it's as much of an issue as some would like to make it out to be. I get it. I get that political ideologies and support for a controversial president, I understand. I get it. But when I talk to former appropriators that have seen lots of numbers, the security is something that has gone on with all governors, and it isn't as substantial an expenditure as one might think. Regarding travel, those travel expenses would normally be paid by the hosting campaign committee that's requesting the presence of our officials. So yeah, I think I get it. I understand the passion. I don't think there's really that much to be concerned about. That's my conclusion after talking to people that have definitely been familiar with previous budgets that address some of those numbers. I did notice that Senate Bill 103 came out of committee 8-1, and it was on the Commerce Committee. So being on the Commerce Committee in the House, that will be interesting to hear. I'm definitely not familiar with it enough to comment on it.
Thank you. Another one that deals with Senate Bill 93. Railway is an important transportation method for our rural districts' economic development. Do you support Senate Bill 93 that provides matching grant money to the Rapid City, Pierre, and Eastern Railroad for upgrades to track, trestles, and bridges from west of Fort Pierre through Midland? You're on mute, Mary.
I'll take that one first. Yes, I do support the bill. We amended it to say that the grant would be contingent upon receiving matching federal funds. It came out of Transportation Committee without opposition and is now in the queue of all the other bills for joint appropriations to see, do we have enough money for it?
Will and I are also co-sponsors on the bill, and I'm in full support.
Same.
All right. So moving on to education. Regarding remote learning in schools, the Pierce School District and many other districts in South Dakota have purchased programs for their students who are learning from home due to COVID. However, these programs violate South Dakota Codified Law 13-33-29, which prohibits schools from granting credit for distance learning unless the course is completed through the South Dakota Virtual School. Will the legislature be doing anything to rectify this situation or to punish these schools for violating this law and putting the education of South Dakota's children at risk?
Okay, education committee people.
Yeah.
Over my head.
Well, the first thing I did was to start Googling this statute. This is the first time that this has come up. I would say as a general matter that every single person I've talked to who is affiliated with our schools has talked about what a tough year it has been and the amount of hoops that they have jumped through that they didn't even know would have ever existed. And so first, I think we need to give these folks some grace in responding to a problem that no one saw coming and for doing an admirable job and putting in hours. I mean, I don't think that there's any single person in the community who in April would have raised their hand and said, hey, can I be superintendent right now? Or can I be on the school board right now? I mean, these are really tough jobs and you're getting a ton of pressure in a lot of different ways. And so, what I told them is they're not going to hear a lot of criticism from me in how they are carrying this out, because it's very easy to armchair quarterback, and hindsight is very easy, and making decisions under fire is very difficult. And so I applaud the effort that they did, and so we'll say that generally. On the remote education, the other thing that I've heard extremely consistently, I wouldn't say this uniformly, but very consistently and overwhelmingly, is that the teachers and the administrators and the parents want kids in school, and that they believe that they learn better in school and not remotely. And so that is a goal of virtually everyone across the board. And we are still in a pandemic. I talked about the personal anxiety I've had in the last couple of days over this. And so I don't fault people who are continuing to pursue their education remotely right now. But I would tell you that it isn't as though these schools are saying, we can only do it this way, we prefer to do it remotely, any of these things. I think that all their goals are to have a safe environment, get our kids back in class together, where they can not only learn together, but do all the other beneficial education activities that come along with learning in a group setting. And so I haven't spent any time with 133329, or haven't heard any of these allegations before, but I would tell you that my hat is off to the folks in our schools, and I think that they are as eager as anyone to get our kids back to learning in a normal environment.
Yeah, I think, well, Will is on the education committee. Like him, I have not heard any concerns about 133329. I cannot imagine that any South Dakotan would want to criticize the jobs that our schools have been trying to do to health educate students. So I just don't see that as a problem.
I can't really add anything additional to that. I think you have to give the administrators a lot of slack. I think they applied their professional knowledge and spirit of going forward and did the best they could do. Regarding violation of codified law, I wouldn't know how to address it. At least at this point, this is the first I've heard of it.
Okay, another question regarding
One last
education.
thing,
Yeah.
Jennifer, one last thing on the actual legal point. I haven't found it yet. I'm just looking. I would be a little surprised if the Department of Education or the governor hadn't issued an executive order that would suspend the effectiveness of that during the pandemic and until we could get it fixed. So I don't know that. I didn't find it in just looking in the last 30 seconds, but that would be a place to look if you're really worried about compliance.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Another question regarding education. Senate Bill 177 makes a number of considerable changes to homeschool rules. The bill allows homeschool students to participate in extracurricular activities without being enrolled in any classes with the local school. Currently, the policy requires that they attend one class to participate, but many districts do not allow participation unless fully enrolled. Where do you stand on this bill and why?
I am a homeschool mom. We did homeschool our daughters up until high school. And so this is an area that I'm really interested in. And when I was first contacted about the bill by the governor's office, my response was, I want to make sure that we maintain enough accountability in there and don't just make things so lax that irresponsible parents make things terrible for everyone else. The bill had 2 very long days of committee hearing in Senate Education Committee. There was, as I understand it, an amendment worked out dealing with the accountability required to participate in extracurricular activities. As I understand it, was an amendment worked out with the High School Activities Association to require some accountability for students who want to participate. I have always found the Pierre School District really easy to work with. So for us, the extracurricular participation was not an issue. Frankly, I don't mind the requirement that a student take at least one class to participate in extracurricular activities. That frankly should be a local school board decision. So I will be voting on that bill probably Tuesday unless we hold it over until Wednesday. I think the bill is better than it was when it was first introduced. But as others have said, there still are some lingering concerns about that bill.
This is maybe the biggest education topic that'll come through this year. I've read the bill a couple of times. I have not spent as much time with the amended version that came through, but it does about 4 or 5 different things. It's a number of different subjects, but one of them is, as you mentioned, the extracurricular. And I try with this and other education topics to look through straight to student impacts. I mean, I know there's a lot of different players involved in education, from teachers to administrators, parents, and in this case, alternative education or homeschool parents kind of meet a lot of those roles all at once. But I think it's my job to look through straight to the student and straight to the kid. And so one of those topics on extracurriculars, I think is a good idea. I mean, I think that it is beneficial for the student, and I think it's beneficial for the schools overall if these kids can participate in some of these extracurricular activities. I'm not interested in making that an unfunded mandate on schools. Right now, they get no money to do it, but a lot of schools will allow alternative education or homeschool kids to opt in. And so right now it's an unfunded option. This would make it an unfunded mandate. And so if they attach some money to it, I think that's a thing that you could get my support on. I mean, I really support people's freedom to educate their kids as long as they are in fact educating them as they see fit. If they want to opt out of the public school system, I support your right and ability to do that. The other 3 or 4 topics that are covered in that bill, in one case, they remove all testing requirements. And I have some real concerns that holding homeschool students to a lower standard than the kids in public schools is not serving them very well. Again, it might be an easier way to do it if you are, again, the teacher, administrator, parent all wrapped into one. I could see the benefit there, but I think I have to keep my eye on the ball here for not just high achieving homeschool students, but that we not leave anybody behind. And so I've got some real concerns with the non-extracurricular portions of that bill.
Well, I started reading SB 177 and kind of quit after I saw that the testing wasn't part of the deal, that they wanted to eliminate that. And I really paused on that and I thought, well, where's the accountability at? It didn't make any sense to me. I did bring it up to one of our constituents who was present at the Capitol, and I asked her about testing, and her comment was, well, the administration really doesn't do anything with them anyway. And I had a tough time coming to grips with that, and I'm not at a point where I can agree with that or what any conclusions were. I did take 2 hours and 40 minutes to listen to the testimony, however, and there's some real passionate conversation about it. And every person I'm confident that every person that showed up for testimony on behalf of SB 177 were dedicated, wonderful parents that did a great job with homeschooling. But I'm really concerned about, and I'm just going to throw out 10% that aren't great at it and that use the opportunity for homeschool for not the benefit of the student. And I'm not sure SB 177 doesn't compound that problem. So I've got some hangups with it. I'll continue to read through past the non-testing part, but I can get over the state mandating that the kids can use extracurricular opportunities. I can get over that. I like Will's thought about throwing some funding their way so it helps the school district to administer that. Something I actually didn't think of until Will just mentioned it. But I've got some underlying problems with it. Mary, I've not seen the amendment to it. I'll read through that as well. So that's a work in progress for me.
I would just like to add that, frankly, I think our current law, which requires testing only in like 4th, 8th, and 11th grades, I've always thought that was kind of dumb. And I tested our daughters every year just so I knew how they were doing, and they were doing quite well. But also to give those kids, my daughters, the chance to know how to take a test, because I figured at some point, if they ever went to public school, they would need to do that. Now, I've been told that, well, the schools never looked at that information anyway. Well, shame on them. But I agree that the lack of testing, lack of proving that your students are actually being taught something, that's one of the things that I have concerns with. And Mike, it's probably closer to 95 or 98% of parents who are doing a great job. But there are a few outliers there that frankly could make things bad for everyone else. And as a former homeschool mom, I would hate to see that happen.
All right, thank you. And so finally, our time is almost up. Besides funding and also to wrap up, besides funding, what other priorities are you working on this session?
You know, Wise Man will say he's trying to keep up. And there's a lot of information that comes your way, and to be diligent, it means doing a lot of reading, you know, getting there early and staying late, which is fine with me. Kind of reminds me of the carpet store days, but to get the knowledge that you need to form an opinion. And I'll just touch on this, you know, forming an opinion isn't just, emotion has something to do with it, but you have to stay to your roots of what really makes you comfortable with yourself, so you can sleep at night when you vote a certain way. I guess I'd have to say I remember having remorse on one bill, and I had a heck of a time sleeping that night. So to represent our district well, I have to stay grounded. So I know that's really not answering the question you had, Jennifer, but I think it's worth mentioning that that's how I go forward.
Similar to Mike in that, you know, he and I are in our first years. And so once we get to Senator Duvall's level, where we have kind of some priorities and some well-defined areas that we've operated in for a long time and can see where to move the ball. I mean, for me, this year is about doing a lot of homework, and I've written about this a lot, but there's a chance that I may have voted no more than almost anyone in our chamber. And it's because I have a pretty heavy default that our state is one that has worked as well as any in the country. And so if we're going to change that, there's a pretty high bar to come over for me. So one of my focuses has been to give the bills that come through as critical a review as I can, and to, you know, work to, again, not vote for something until I'm pretty satisfied that the current law isn't working. And so I wish I could tell you that I'm reforming this for the better and overhauling that, but this year, really, like Mike, it's about studying hard, working hard to make sure that if we're changing anything in South Dakota, it really ought to be changed.
So for me, the biggest issue this year is a responsible budget. We know that there's a lot of one-time money that needs to be, I think, allocated wisely. And we talked about that earlier. The other thing that's going on right now is trying to set ourselves up for the budget, not this year, but 2 and 3 years down the road. Right now, there's a difference between the House and Senate Appropriations Committees as far as which path they want to go. The Senate wants to take a much more conservative approach. And so that's a tension point that I think will come to a boiling point as we get close to the end of session. And then beyond that, we will be redistricting this year, legislative redistricting. We just heard that, you know, the Census Bureau probably will not have numbers for us until July, which really shortens up the time frame available for that committee to do its work. So that's going to be a big issue that I will be looking forward to over the interim.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We are now at noon, and I look forward to speaking to you all again on March 5th over Zoom again. And in the meantime, stay warm, and I look forward to following session until then. Thank you.